What's your greatest, most satisfying, I ducking called it, moment? Kept finding small cut-up straws in my grandma's bathroom. So many straws. I let my grandmother know that someone is using her bathroom to use drugs. She freaks out, saying I'm accusing her of using drugs and that it's impossible. A year later, my uncle divorces his wife due to her cocaine addiction. Grandma says, well, Kay always stopped by in the afternoon to use the restroom and then she would clean my whole house and I just didn't think anything of it. My favorite story at Thanksgiving. Kay can come do cocaine in my bathroom if she cleans my house afterwards. I'll even leave her pre-cut straws. Edit to add, whoever gilded me, may your future be filled with clean houses and cocaine. NGL, the most obvious crystal meth user who I worked with at the hotel was very good at cleaning rooms. Quick and through. That's kind of hilarious tbh. Like, grabbed my just was like, oh what a clean house idea. Late to the party here, but what the hell? Cause this story is bonkers. Back in the early 90s I was in my early 20s and as people in their early 20s often do, I spent a lot of late nights at my local Denny's hanging out with friends and drinking cheap coffee. The late night wait staff was pretty small, so my friends and I wound up getting to know them pretty well, socializing with them as well. Some of them would hook us up with free fries or sodas, that kind of thing. And every now and again if things were slow, they'd sit at our booth with us. One of the people who would hang out with us was Charles. Charles was an older guy in his 50s who was very nice to my friends and me, but he was a little creepy. He would never get overt about it, but he definitely embraced the whole creepy uncle persona, maybe even being a little tongue-in-cheek about it. He'd tell the girls in my group how pretty they were, and how he wished he was still young, that sort of thing. Reading between the lines, he was telling them he wished he could have sex with them. But this is not going where you think it is. I'm just setting the stage, y'all. The guy was a little weird, but he was a nice guy to us. All the same, I remember telling people Charles has a secret. He's in his 50s, slinging coffee at an all-night restaurant, but he comes off as educated and sort of worldly. He talks about traveling and living well. I don't know what it is, but Charles is damaged. I bet he killed somebody or something. I was convinced that the nice guy bit was a cover for something dark. Yeah, so as my group got older, people came and went. Some of us fell out with others. Some of us got real jobs and couldn't stay up until 4 a.m. at a Denny's, and we eventually stopped hanging out there. Never really gave Charles much thought after that, for years. Then I saw Charles on the news. Turns out Charles was Charles Rothenberg, a man who, in 1983, was going through a bad divorce. In what I understand was originally intended to be a murder-suicide, he drugged his 6-year-old son David, doused the boy in kerosene, and lit him on fire. David survived, but was horribly scarred for the rest of his life. Charles continued to get into criminal trouble, and was ultimately sentenced to 25 years in prison as a result of California's 3 strikes law. He's still in prison today, but in the late 90s he changed his name to Charlie Charles because sure, why not? In 1988 there was a TV movie based on the incident called David, which starred Bernadette Peters as his mother. Meanwhile, his son David became one of Michael Jackson's child friends and eventually an artist. When he was 19, he visited Charles in prison, apparently reading a prepared statement to him. "Charles, you are not my father. You are an imposter. Parents don't hinder their children from experiencing a normal childhood. I wish that you could experience the trauma and pain that I have gone through." Afterward, David told the press he wanted me to know that he loved me. The last thing I said was, "No you don't," and I walked out. In a somewhat bizarre turn, David later legally changed his own name to Dave, mirroring the Charlie Charles name his father adopted. I have no idea if this is coincidental somehow, but the irony is not lost on me, that's for sure. Dave even appeared on the Larry King Show to talk about Michael Jackson when he died. If I recall correctly, he defended Jackson against the reports of child molestation and denied he was a victim of Jackson's. Unfortunately, Dave himself passed away last year. At the age of 42, his ongoing medical issues, which were the result of his burn injuries, eventually killed him. And in my opinion, that means Charles was ultimately successful in murdering his son. So, yeah, I called it. Charles was harboring something dark when he was getting free fries from my friends and telling the girls how pretty they were. I just had no idea how dark. When I met my mom's husband's adult kids, after a few minutes of hanging out with them, I followed my mom into the kitchen. Me? 3 of his 4 kids are gay? Mom? No, only 1 is. Me? No, 3 are. 10 years later, one of his children is in a same-sex marriage and 2 of his kids are living with long-time same-sex partners. Had a friend who started dating a guy while she was in the middle of rehab for alcohol and drug abuse. Found out the guy was a former meth user. I told her she was going to end up in prison or worse if she didn't break up with them. She was on probation for multiple DUIs. Within 2 months, not only was she in prison, she was pregnant while in prison. Probably too late, but I want to share this anyway. The last few months of my wife's pregnancy with my daughter, the little baby would regular as clockwork, around 10:30 p.m. put her feet against my wife's ribs and try to straighten her legs so she could headbutt her way out of my wife. Bam! Headbutt to the inside of your whatever. My wife would duck and jump up, cursing like a sailor every time. It was painful, but also hilarious, reliable, and I guess we knew she'd be an active little kid well before she was born. Cut to the evening of her birth. The doctor is telling us around 9 p.m. that things are going well. But he's going to go get dinner because he hasn't eaten and there's no way this kid is coming out before midnight. I look at my wife, look at the dog, and say, "Don't go far. The kid is going to deliver herself around 10:30 p.m., I promise you. You're just going to have to catch her." He laughed, told us he's been doing this a long time, and he wasn't worried. 10:25 he's rushing in and barely gets his gloves and scrubs on before my daughter shoots herself out of mommy like a greased bullet. Direct quote from the doctor looking at me as he holds my little darling. Well, I guess even I can learn things still. I don't blame him at all. Who would believe parents about something like that? But that kid had done so many test runs on such a regular schedule, I knew there was no stopping her. And fair game. Getting headbutted daily for a month or whatever as a trade-off to having a very short and easy labor? There are worse deals. I've been practicing law in the same venue for many years with the same judges and attorneys. New hotshot attorney out of law school is opposing counsel. It's a death case. My client was not responsible, but opposing counsel would not listen to reason. On the eve of trial, my client is willing to offer a decent amount to settle the case. I called the attorney and encouraged her to take it. I told her that if she didn't accept, when we went to trial the next day I was going to have all her evidence thrown out and strike her witnesses. She thought I was bluffing. I assured her I was not. I told her to call any attorney in the area and ask them if I was a straight shooter. She basically told me to duck in and that she'd see me at trial. Sure enough, the judge excludes her documentary evidence, all hearsay, and strikes her witnesses. She has zero evidence when the judge is through with her. Her client was in tears. I think she got sued for malpractice. She wasn't at that firm long after that debacle. But I ducking told her that would happen. Found out my now ex-husband was sleeping with a coworker. So naturally we divorced but still have to keep in contact because we have a daughter. Well, her fiancé finds out and leaves her as well. Now she is a decade older than me and had mentioned that she and her ex-fiancé had been trying for a baby for a long time, but never conceived. He continued to see her and eventually she moved on with him. He didn't want any more kids. I told him to be careful because I suspected she was only with him to have a baby. Fast forward a year and she's pregnant. He comes to terms with it after being slightly upset. Fast forward a year after their baby was born and she breaks up with him. Shocker. I don't care if they're up 28-3. They're the Falcons. They'll blow it somehow. In high school, my best friend's little sister, 16 at the time, brought home her new 18-year-old BF from work to meet the family. I was over at the time and talked to him for a while because we were the same age. After meeting him, something was off. I got the impression that 1, he was much older than claiming, 2, had been in jail. I wound up saying something to my friend, who told his parents and sister. Long story short, the family freaked out on me for spreading rumors that weren't true, telling me to mind my own business, etc. 2 years later, the sister comes home from a date with him in tears. He finally came out and admitted to her that 1, he was 30, not the now 20 he was saying. 2, he had spent 2 years in prison, but refused to say for what. I was very quick to point out to the family how I called this years earlier and was basically shamed out of their house. Edit. Rather than responding to everyone's comments, I figured it was easier to add an edit on a few things. 1, I'm really not sure how the family didn't immediately pick up he was a lot older. I can only venture to guess and would rather not speculate. Also, this was before the time of being able to Google someone and look up their records too. I'm still close with my friend and his family. There was a point later on where I got it. Gee, maybe we should have listened to you. 3, I have no clue what he was in jail for. Still don't know. 4, for those who call me insensitive for pointing out I was right almost immediately. I was 20, had previously taken a lot of grief for calling this out, and it wasn't exactly let go quickly on their end. Following a car with its left turn signal on for 2 miles. The driver kept slowing at side streets as if to make a left turn, but didn't actually turn. I looked over at my daughter and said, "Watch. They'll make a right turn." Ducking called it. Yes, they were still signaling left when they made the right turn. Ed, it's not it's. When my brother and sister-in-law planned a trip home for Easter weekend, I told my wife and parents that they were coming to announce their pregnancy. Everyone told me I was crazy and they'd just use the family chat for that. Cue Easter lunch on Saturday and my sil refuses a glass of wine and everyone guesses she's pregnant. Called it? Like and subscribe.